It's a new rise. Can somebody lift those hands tonight? It's a new rise. I need you to speak it over your own life tonight. It's a new rise. It's a new rise.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Propel Deep Dive. I'm Megan DiMartino, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me and my very special guest today. And before we begin our interview with my guest, I'd like to share a bit about what the Propel Deep Dive is, what the Propel program is, and what the Propel community is. Basically, I have been starting, scaling, and sustaining businesses over the last 35 years. And I want to share with you that this is not, I'm not sharing this to impress you, but to impress upon you that you too can do this. Your passion is my purpose. And I am here to help you see that in these stories of my guest, that everyone has a beginning. Everyone has a start, and everyone takes that heart, meaning what is in their heart of their passion, and it evolves to their purpose. So I'm here to help you start, scale, and hopefully sustain the business and life of your dreams. And with that, I started the Propel program in 2021, which gives you a roadmap to do that. And it encompasses my 5 C's, which are clarity, courage, confidence, commitment, and compassion. And in this conversation with my guest, Francis Leger, today, you will hear he share his journey, and that encompasses these 5 C's, because we all, as I said, have a beginning. So the other piece I'd like to share with you is the Propel community. We'll have a trailer on the bottom throughout this interview and this time together. And I'd love you to go to it and join the community, because you will receive so much from joining the community. You'll have a daily inspiration and motivation nugget from me, a monthly newsletter, and also we do events. We do online trainings. We do a virtual events, let's just call it that, and certainly the Propel Deep Dive. And in the community, the Propel Deep Dives are archived. So you'll be able to go back and not only listen to Francis's interview, but also other people that I have had the blessing to speak with over the last 5 years. So that is basically it. This is live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, of course. So please subscribe on our YouTube channel. That way people can find us and experience the richness and the fullness and the hope and infinite possibilities that the Propel program offers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you, but before I do, I'd like to share a brief bio of Francis Leger. Francis is an international conductor of music. He is a cellist. He has traveled the world. He speaks many languages. He's a brilliant man with a great joie de vivre, and just want you to hear his story of how he began and the evolution of bringing him here today. And he himself is beginning a business. So it's never too early, guys, and it's never too late to create the life of your dreams. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my friend, Francis Leger.
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Blessed to have you here, Francis. As I shared in the intro, a little bit, teeny weeny bit about you. You know, your story is full of twists and turns and very exciting experiences, of course, but travel and people you've met, and that has expanded your horizons. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you with me is that, of course, but also, as I shared, we all have a beginning. We all are young Megan and Francis's, and with dreams in our hearts and talents that God has put in us. And many people squelch those and do not follow through. They do not. They just say, they have that lesser than, I can't do this. I'm not equipped. I don't have the training. I don't have the knowledge. But, when you're a young man, you certainly didn't have that, but you continued on with that dream and that, heart in your heart. So with that said, do share with our guests a little bit about you. Where you were born, where you grew up, and a little bit about your journey and what brought you here today.
Yes. All right. Well, first of all, I grew up in central Massachusetts, and it was about an hour west of Boston. Wonderful family, mother and father, very supportive. And I have two slightly older sisters, just a few years older. But when I was growing up, I enjoyed music, enjoyed sports. I was an avid golfer. In fact, I can remember even during the summers before I was old enough to work, my father would be kind enough and supportive enough to even drop me off at the golf course before sunrise. And then he'd go off to work and come back and pick me up. And so there was some wonderful support there in terms of upbringing. But as far as music, I was involved with the band when I was growing up and had some interest in it. I took piano lessons and unlike other young people, I didn't do very well. I was actually taking lessons with a couple of different teachers and then went to this one teacher. And after just a few lessons, she decided to kick me out because I had some sort of little bad habit she couldn't handle. But my point is, I said, okay, well, thank you very much. And I continued. I took trumpet lessons. I started taking trumpet and then the teacher left. And so I stopped. And I remember very well, my mother said, listen, do you want to take more lessons? I said, well, no, I'll be all right for a while. But then after a couple of years, I started up again. And then, of course, high school comes and I got much more involved in music. I was in the band. I was president of the band at one point and playing trumpet. And I was the one that would freeze when, whenever you were at the football game, playing those charges, da 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 ba ba charge, and so that kind of thing. But I was very much involved, even with drum and bugle corps, that sort of thing. And the funny thing, though, is that I was never a prodigy. I mean, I was a musician when I was young, and even my sisters and mother played a little bit of piano because I remember hearing the music and hearing some of these older classical recordings that you could get, like say, from the bank, or if you ordered them, by mail order, you could get some of these classical recordings of like March Slav or Tchaikovsky's William Tell Overture or whatever. But so we always had music in the house, and that's what was so encouraging. But I tell you that because while I loved music, it still wasn't the obsession or the passion or what I felt was the calling. It was only later on where I felt like things were being cultivated and coming together. Mm-hmm. And so that's something, especially for your audience, that I would point out.
Yes, very much so, because I was going to say, because when you hear, I think this is important, because when you hear a conductor and a cellist and so forth, you think of a prodigy, but what you're really sharing, Francis, is that it's been an evolution of your life.
Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. And you're so right when you say it's never too early or too late to begin, because case in point, in my experience, I actually was a trumpet major in college. And so I thought, okay, conducting and trumpet, that's what I'm going to be. And that's what I'm going to do. And I had things planned. But what I found out as I progressed further and further, I could only go so far. Then all of a sudden, something wasn't quite right. And so anyway, just fast forward a little bit without going into details, except to say I had a medical problem, a throat problem. And so different doctors and surgeons said, well, you could have surgery, but it might go back the same way after, like, say, 6 months or a year. So I actually had to make a decision, and I was almost 21. And so instead of continuing with trumpet, which I couldn't do, or any other wind instrument, I chose to start cello from scratch. And so fortunately, I found that the cello teacher at my college in upstate New York was someone who was he was passionate. He had a calling to teach. He was extraordinary actually as a teacher. But he said, "Listen, are you interested in working hard?" And I said, "Well, of course. What am I going to do?" Yes. There wasn't really the option. Yes, there was, but there wasn't. So I said, absolutely. And so he, along with others who were mentoring and supporting, got me through. So in 2 years, I was able to finish the program and then take some time to basically a year to work and then go to graduate school for conducting and for cello performance.
So
I
let's
was
stop.
fortunate. Yes.
But let's stop for a minute because, again, as I shared in my intro, there are things in life that stop us in our tracks, and we, for whatever reason, meaning I'm talking about self-confidence, courage, that courage and confidence, that we talk ourselves out. I mean, you were in college, you could. Happened. Uh-oh, we had a little Wi-Fi glitch there. But you could see, we just continue on, right? But you made a decision that you would, like the professor asked you, are you committed? Are you committed to switching fields or instruments? Because that was not an easy task. It wasn't. I mean, I'm not going to allow you to minimize that because that is, huge in one's journey, because we can stop. We can truly abort the mission. And and you chose not to do that. You committed to work with this gentleman and continue on. So continue, please.
Yes. And just to add to that, I would like to make sure your listeners understand that with the way we learn, the way we think, a lot of times people are more visual and more audio. And in my case, I'll be very honest, being a trumpet player or a wind player, you have one kind of technique. Essentially, you play and with the breath and you form the sound and it comes out. But with strings, it's a whole different story because the bow, when you're going across the string, is your breath. And the left hand is the emotion. So if you're vibrating using vibrato, that gives you the warmth of the note or the sound. The reason why I say that is because my way of thinking, or one's way of thinking as a wind player, is set for technique. But once you learn that you have to play strings and to know that on one string, okay, you get this note, but just by going up here and playing another fingering, it's an octave higher. It's like, 8 notes higher. All of a sudden, then that's a whole different story. So you have to just decide, okay, all right, that's just how it is. And you have to reprogram literally your mind and your thinking and not let it be something that's insurmountable or a thing. The second thing I want to just point out very briefly, and not to sound melodramatic, but when I had started, it was also the same time when I had friends that were auditioning, like say for Syracuse Symphony or a couple of major symphonies actually, but a number of other friends who were auditioning for graduate school. So here I am, and I'm where I am. And as a musician, at the time, I would like to have thought that I was on my way and pretty progressive sort of musician or person. But then when your technique is down to level 1 and below level 1, then all of a sudden it's a whole different story. Right. So I remember one time in particular when I was practicing in the evening and just starting out, and I heard a couple of voices outside and didn't know them, but clearly they said, one said to the other, he said, oh man, it sounds like a music minor, minor, just starting cello or something. The other guy says, no, it's worse than that. I said, oh, okay. So here I am. So you do what you have to do, and you just say, okay, well, thanks very much. You proceed. So you don't, and I wouldn't even say you put blinders on, because you don't want to do that, because then you miss other things that are going to contribute to your experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where you just keep on keeping on.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds trite and cliche, but at the same time, you really do. You may not notice much progress at all, and then all of a sudden you have a breakthrough, you have a click, and then something happens.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of belief, you just realize, oh, okay. And I tell you that there again, just to share with your listeners, is that you don't know what or how far you really are progressing until you sometimes get the feedback from other people. Mm-hmm. And I may have mentioned this before, but in a brief conversation, but after playing a short amount of time, you have to play juries. You have to play for other faculty. So there are the principal faculty member that you study with, but then other teachers. And so after a few months, when I had to do this jury, the teachers were all there, and they ask you to play scales and different kinds of etudes or a piece of music or whatever. And so I did that. But one of the teachers thought that it was a joke, it was a practical joke, and stopped the jury. But in fact, it wasn't. It's just that I had progressed quite well. And I tell you that, it's certainly not to brag, but to mention that you really do also need sometimes outside feedback, just to know, oh, yes, gee, I really am on the right track, or I am progressing. And yes, I'm not saying it has to be constant. It just needs to be maybe a kind word. Maybe it needs, a kind gesture. Mm-hmm. Somebody saying, hey, listen, if you need help with that, I'm happy to help. Mm-hmm. But just someone who recognizes that there's something inside there that just needs to be drawn out. Or maybe it's just a technique or a simple thing that's not going to change everything, but just that little bit that'll make a difference. And well, especially in your work, I mean, there's no question about it. You can tell that what you're offering, the kind of motivation and mentoring. And
well, help, encouragement is key.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, you mentioned in a conversation that we've had that your mother wanted you to major, I guess, in academic, meaning to a teaching certificate.
Yes.
And so let's chat for a minute about that safe road versus that more challenging road. I don't want to say entrepreneurial, but meaning the road less traveled.
Yes. Good question. Well, my parents, my mother and my father, obviously very practical in terms of upbringing, and they were the mindset that essentially, look, we know you can do it. We know you've got the ability, you've got the drive, determination, etc., to do whatever you wanted to do. But a teaching degree, especially at the time, and we're talking about the 70s, okay? I know I'm dating myself, but in the 70s, and it was a time when, still education, you get the piece of paper, you get the degree, you get the credentials, and that sets you up. Mm-hmm. So publicly, from a public perspective, you're marketable. And in that sense, understanding that was their way of essentially ensuring me that I'd have the best opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I, in fact, did that. It wouldn't have been my first choice, but at the same time, out of respect and out of with what my parents gave to me, it would have been pretty much a slap in the face to go the other route. But now, having said that, you also have to tuck certain ambitions and aspirations in order to get through the program, so to speak. So from an educational perspective, even in terms of teaching, which I love teaching. I mean, that's very much a part of me. But to be able to perform the way I wanted to and to be able to conduct and all these things, I really found that I had to just temper my ambitions in that sense. And that's a tough thing to sometimes control, especially years later,
Yes.
because the practical aspect of life kicks in
Mhm,
and having
mhm,
other responsibilities. So,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I'm sure you as well as anyone else in the audience knows about that, certainly.
Sure. Well, it's about
It's, it's,
balance. It's
it's
about
critical.
really,
Yes, yes.
you were in the field, you didn't go off and be a professor in, archaeology. I mean,
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
could have, but meaning you
Hmm.
stayed in your wheelhouse, and that
Hmm. Hmm.
on some level enhanced and created a balance in, I'm sure, in your life. So because again,
Yes,
as an
yes.
artist, as you are, and again, I'm not saying that. As I said, that's one of the reasons I so wanted to interview you, because I mean, I
Hmm.
haven't had that many artists um, in the deep dive. And so, but regardless, it is a career and it is a field, and it is so vastly important, the arts
Hmm.
I'm speaking about.
Yes.
So, but having that balance, like you've said, you're very much a teacher, you said. And I can
Yes.
see that
Hmm.
not only in your career, but in your personhood. And we'll get into later what you're doing now, but it's back
Hmm.
to that teaching. It
Yes, yes.
really is that teaching heart. But before we go there, so you've finished graduate school, and just share a little thumbnail sketch of your, I don't want to say peripatetic, but meaning your many travels around the world and some of the orchestras that you have participated in, and how you participated with them.
Yes, certainly, certainly. Well, after I went to graduate school in Boston, I went to Boston Conservatory and studied there and took conducting as well as cello performance. But then after that, when I finished up, I made arrangements to move to Rome, move to Italy. And that was pretty vital because at that point, I had been re-energized, especially as far as classical music. And so you talk about the music education side of things. I was back
Mhm.
into performance. I was back into the swing of things, and I had been, in fact, between undergraduate school and graduate school, I had also been working at Opera Company of Boston. It ended up, well, after I returned, I worked for a little bit longer, but close to about 5 years, part time, couple seasons full time. But there you do everything, and that's one of those things where you can't be. In a sense, you don't want to be choosy because you want to build the kind of foundation where you just completely understand everything. So even if you're not the one that's doing the stagecraft or doing the lighting or whatever it happens to be, you still want to be the one that's, if you're conducting, to understand that, oh, well, they need time for a set change, or they need X amount of time to make this happen or that happen. So I was very much involved with that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Assistant conductor, you're working with children's opera, you're working with you might be helping, schlepping stands or something like that. Because I was also an assistant to a conductor in a local orchestra. And so you do whatever it takes. And it's a lot like academe in the sense that you're basically it and you move everything around. But just to fast forward a little bit, so I had actually made the move to Rome, and when I left, I really didn't know how long I would be there. I thought perhaps a year, maybe two, but you don't know because career-wise, you don't know where it would take you.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I decided, okay, I'll go over. Now, having said that, I didn't know. I basically knew a couple of words in Italian, literally, just so I could say, questo, oh, pensione, prego, or whatever, is there pension, or is there a hotel or someplace? So I literally did not know Italian, and so I moved there and stayed at a pensione. It's a little bit more glorified than a hostel, but I stayed there, and I remember first hearing in the echoing, like when the windows were open in the alleyway, hearing everyone yelling, oh no, basta, basta, or stop, stop, or enough, enough, and hearing families are, whether it was arguing or somebody just greeting someone, or fresh fish, that kind of thing. You'd hear the person from the street calling. So at least I was able to start getting Italian in my ear. And in terms of sensibilities, I had an idea of what the language was like, but I still had to learn more and more. So having said that, I did that. And because I worked as a consultant there. Again, I was teaching at a couple of international schools, British schools, and about 65 different nationalities. And so when you talk about language, and this is just to throw out for the audience again, I'll never forget an experience. We were doing a little tour to Spain. And so the train ride, we're going along and going by Monaco and then eventually to Spain. But I'll never forget being there. And there was a student, we're talking about 16, 17 years old. A student was asked a question in Italian. He turns around and speaks in Italian. He was asked something in Greek, spoke in Greek. And then after that, he turned around and he was asked by one of the teachers something in English. Absolutely flawless British accent, as if he had been in London English school for 13 years. It was extraordinary. And that told me right away in terms of the training or the understanding or the importance of languages, why you do what you do and why that has to be done. And that's why that's something that has to be encouraged in the States, especially, even though English is considered, the language. But
I mean, we could take this conversation in that direction right there, but that'll be another show. But yes. And so, because that is so vital, and that's all I am going to say is that communication, however one does that, whether it's music, Montavani, you were mentioning earlier.
Oh, yes.
The records and the banks, my father getting the Montavani albums. But the point is that's communication, and communicating here, communicating with each other. And today communication, and again, it can be writing, it can be, in so many facets, but communication is really not being not even encouraged. It's just not happening, And so
yes.
And I don't want to call it an art because it's truly a part of who we are as humans, So music to me, even though, as I told you, I can't even carry a tune, is vital into my life. Vital.
Yes.
So, you were in Italy. Yes. Pardon me?
Yes. So I was in Italy and so spent some time there. I was there. I ended up being there a little over a year, studied with Franco Ferrara, who was one of the last great Italian maestros. And he was in fact considered to be kind of the Italian Mozart because he was a composer. He played organ, keyboard. He was also a violinist. And he was a composer. He conduct a lot of movie scores with some fine Italian actresses. But so I studied with him for a time there. And then after that, came back to the States in '84, started working with Opera Company of Boston again for a short time. They needed somebody to fill in. So I did. And then I took a teaching position. But the interesting thing was there was a university that had an opening for a conductor for the orchestra. And so I had heard that they were looking for somebody. And, that was the case. So I applied. But then I found out, well, no, it wasn't the case. But a couple of months later, I had been teaching. And this was in New Hampshire. We're talking 4 seasons and, having to shovel or plow through with a van about 100 feet of driveway to get to work sometimes, when the snow was so bad. I received a phone call and the dean said, listen, we've got one opening left for auditioning for a doctoral program. Would you be interested in going for your doctorate? And at this point, I said, well, I appreciate it, but I hadn't planned for it. But he said, okay, well, just keep it in mind if you're interested. And so I didn't take much thought. I turned around and then got in touch and said, okay, yes, I'll take the audition spot. So basically I auditioned and then was accepted into the program. And so I went for another year to university. So essentially I logged in about 8 full-time years, maybe a little bit more of college and university. And I was teaching. I took another teaching position at that point, part-time at Eastern Connecticut State University. And so I was doing that and doing some conducting. I was with Music Guild and doing some musical theater and Man of La Mancha, those kinds of things. But then after that, essentially, I met my future wife by working at the university. And so we ended up moving to Texas. And at that point, and you certainly understand the whole dual career couple thing where you decide, okay, we'll do this and we'll try to, as far as the game plan to make it work, you do whatever you have to do. Sure. And so, I stepped aside and made sure that she could get secured in her new post. And then started again, restarted the career and was doing things. So I was involved with, just to give you an idea, the Czech Chamber Philharmonic in Prague for a number of years. Now, it may sound glamorous, but so much of the work really has to do with advertising, marketing, promoting, trying to get people interested, the orchestra itself in terms of where they perform, that kind of thing. I had done some work in Shanghai, and that went quite well, and was invited back to do some other things. In fact, was involved in Shanghai working with an educational association with actually a friend, but someone who was involved with setting up music schools all over the country in China. So that was quite an experience. But the big thing was also one of the components, I should say, without getting too verbal here, is that I also was very much involved or had an interest in opera. And so I did try to start my own opera company in the Boston area. And we got a grant. And so, we did a few little things, but nothing that could really sustain. And that's the important thing that I want to really stress with the audience, is that this kind of thing, as wonderful as it is, and I'm passionate about music to the point where if I let myself go, I could get caught up and not really care. Oh, well, okay, it's only that much compensation. All right, well, we'll make it up someplace. And that's it just isn't the case, because as glamorous as it may seem, it's not how it happens. And so that's an important thing to
it is. It's
stress, because it led into
real. Yes, it's real world. It's real world, real life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
So, and I just want to have you share a bit. So, as you said, you came to Texas and supported your wife and her new career post, as you called it, and but then you got involved with Texas A&M for quite a while, doing many, to me, in studying what you've done, it essentially bridged many things of what you did in the past together, which will then lead to what your a business or a project that you're working on, to your legacy, to leave your legacy.
Yes.
So just share a little thumbnail sketch of what you were doing, tying all of what you did over the years for Texas A&M. Yes.
Okay. Yes. In fact, when we were talking about the conducting side of things, like the 90s and 2000s and 2010s, in the teen years, yes, my wife had actually been working at Southwestern University as the founding dean of the Seraphim School of Fine Arts. And so she was involved very much there. And so I was invited as a guest artist from time to time to work with other people. But in addition, I had also started a couple of small businesses, basically under one umbrella. It's not as if there were 2 or 3 different revenue streams, but it was, one was, for example, International Classical Music Initiatives. And it was intended to encourage businesses if they wanted to have, like, say, a cultural experience, to have a little bit of cultural capital, if you will, to show that they have interest in the arts. They could get in contact with me, and whether it's a larger budget or smaller budget, we would provide some sort of musical experience or artistic experience for them. So I did something like that. But then also, I had another business that I was trying to get going. And it did involve, of course, conducting and doing some composing. And in fact, I even did, music for fashion shows, like in town, in Austin. But this kind of work, what actually got me to the place where I am now is that I can actually bring it back to when I was actually a college student. In music, when you're trying to learn and set the foundation up, you're taught that you're supposed to be able to read in different musical clefs. Now, for your audience, they may be aware of, like, the G clef or treble clef, or maybe the bass clef, which is the clef that takes care of the lower notes. So musicians or people who are just interested in music do that. They'll learn maybe 1 or 2 clefs. But as a music student, from the first year of freshman music theory, you have to start learning how to read all of the different clefs. And there are actually 7 clefs. And I won't labor this, but I will say that when I was taking time, especially in the mid 70s and late 70s, I spent about 6 hours a day for several months trying to get a handle on it. And the way it's taught, essentially, the way it's taught and has been for well over 1,000 years, is that, okay, you learn this one, then you learn the second, then the third one. And they make it seem as if it's supposed to be progressive, but it's also this add-on mentality. Mm-hmm. And so what I found was, and even professionals or fine musicians who would teach it, they'd say, okay, you do this, this, this. And once you get to, say, the 4th clef or the 5th clef, all right, then you just do the same thing. But nobody would ever get to that. They'd say, then you just continue on your way. And so I didn't know, literally, of in Boston, for example, I didn't know anyone, my colleagues or other fine, professional musicians, who could actually do it. And so I realized, I said, wait a minute, if I'm going to be learning musical scores and parts and knowing what these different instruments are supposed to do, and if you have to do in music, you have to sometimes transpose instruments and this kind of thing, meaning that one instrument, even though you might be playing in the key of C, one instrument actually is keyed in a different key. So you already have to read a different clef. So I just tell you that because it took from the late 70s, okay, onward. And then in 2005, I had a pretty significant breakthrough. And that allowed me to formulate what I eventually came up to creating, which is this way of teaching it. Call it a new improved formula, whatever you like. Mm-hmm. But it did take a number of years to cultivate that. Now, I tell you that because all along, you're still doing it. You're tweaking it. And and I should mention, without carrying this too far, but sometimes if somebody has a problem, and I'm throwing this out to your audience, if somebody has a problem processing and just can't get through this break, they just can't have a breakthrough, I would suggest literally do whatever is necessary. In my case, I found that the book that I created, okay, or at the time had about 100 and some odd pages, I literally, and my wife was okay with this at the time, but I literally took about 110 pages, okay, and went all across the wall and literally taped page after page after page so that I could start spotting and saying, oh, okay, all right, and get a really cohesive understanding of where we were going, part A, B, C, D, E, F. Because if you don't do that, then at some point there'll be gaps, or at some point there'll be a place where somebody will ask you a question and you'll just say, whoa, I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
And by doing this, it unlocked, it basically would unfreeze anything that gave me an issue or concern. So anyway, so back to that, I did that kind of worked, and meanwhile, I was also involved back again in music, of course, but Texas A&M University in Central Texas is a new campus. It's been around probably about 20 years now in Killeen, which is near Fort Hood or Fort Cavazos. And so I went to see if they basically needed anyone, and had conversations with a couple of administrators. And it turned out I met a wonderful gentleman there, and we started talking, and he said, you know, we could really use someone like you. So without laboring it, I was able to carry some of my background and expertise, even in terms of, you know, whether it's, what should I say? I should say, like the technical skills, the writing skills, creating posters, all of this kind of thing, proofreading. And in fact, I remember there was something that one of your previous guests mentioned about Kinkos and about kerning letters, and you know, you have to kern certain letters, you know, and words and that kind of thing. That was the kind of thing I actually had to get involved with, because if you're doing posters or bios or you know, basically, you know, writing things about orchestras, you know, you have to have everything just so, and it has to be just right, whether it's a program, poster, brochure, what have you. So, but anyway, having said that, my packet of skills, if you will, were essentially required. And so I did take a position at A&M Central Texas, and I was there for several years in different capacities, because it didn't have a full-fledged program. So I ended up teaching I prepared about 9 different music courses, and was teaching theory and some advanced conducting, depending where students were, and filling the gaps wherever they needed to be plugged in.
So as we bring this to a close, and I know that
yes,
you are working on a project, and I don't, you know, I'm sure you're not comfortable in talking in major depth, because again, it's not totally put together, but that's why I wanted you to share what you did in this last segment, because it's pulling together, like you said, the 7 clefs, and you know, pulling together that. And so folks, stay tuned, because Mr. Leger is going to blow the world apart with his new program, the world of music. Yes.
Oh, yes. I should have you as my representative. Really, that's very kind of you to say that.
That is what I do. That is what I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Essentially, the work that I did, and it's from the transformation I personally experienced.
Yes,
literally from the late 70s, 80s, moving onward.
Yes.
And being told, even by one conductor years ago, that I remember in a rehearsal, this was for an institute, and the conductor looked at me and he said, that's Ligier nonsense, you know. And he thought it was just kind of nonsense. Okay. But interestingly, that summer, he asked every conductor he tried to always catch a conductor off guard and say, okay, sing it or play, you know, or whatever. And it turned out at one point I was the only one to do it, you know, and to do this particular thing he asked. and all the musicians shuffled their feet and they were excited about it. Well, anyway, it's partially associated with what I came up with, and it's this method or formula or what have you that can essentially take musicians, aspiring musicians, music teachers, help them go from being limited, frustrated, and overwhelmed by their inability to read certain musical notes or areas of notes to essentially quickly, accurately, and confidently identifying any note on any staff using any clef. And for a musician, it is life-changing. And so that's what I came up with. It's a way that allows people to learn, whether they're even youngsters. If the mom and dad say, "Hey, listen, we'd love Johnny or Sally to learn how to do this," it can be done. Because I also over the years realized that it doesn't require musical talent. It requires an ability to understand and spaces and lines and spaces, that sort of thing. But I'm hoping, and I'm not trying to sound over the top, but I don't think it's the kind of breakthrough that's happened in roughly 1,000 years since the 11th century, where this Guido of Arezzo or Guido del Monaco, from Arezzo near Cortona, Italy, came up with the do re mi part of things in terms of learning how to read music or sing music. So if things go as planned, I'm still in the market research phase, but if things go as planned, I should be able to get it out very soon, because I also know with AI, it's one of those things that can really be challenging. And since I didn't use AI, I don't want to I don't want to have that overtake it and overshadow what was an enormous amount of work, and I would say sacrifice too.
So take the show on the road, as they say.
Yes.
So as we close, Francis, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask many of my guests who have had journeys, and yours is, what's fascinating to me about you and your journey is that it truly has been an evolution. Many people, and you mentioned that you listened to a previous guest, many people have these defining moments, these, combustible things that happen and propel them forward and so forth, or stop them. And then they've stopped for years, but not you. You meaning you've just continued to evolve and grow, and your passion has only become stronger. That is what I see. And so the question I'd like to ask you as we close is, what is your passion and what is your purpose at this point in your life?
To sum it up in just a few words, I would say that the purpose ultimately, whether it's conducting or playing or teaching, it really is service and giving. And the passion still is involved with offering or creating artistry in any form, and putting it out there to everyone and anyone. That's probably one of the key ways of looking at it.
Yes. And service, meaning that just encouraging others and helping them find their path as well.
Yes.
In their experience of music and your heart, because you're a very soulful person. And
thank you.
You're welcome. Well, is there anything you'd like to leave with our guests, with our first deep dive? We can certainly do this again, but as your business things evolve. But is there anything you'd like to leave with our guests?
Yes, I would. Actually, two things very quickly, if you don't mind. One is to especially thank you with what you're doing. Kudos. It's fantastic work. But the other thing I wanted to leave with everyone is that this is something that's perpetuated for decades and decades. So you talk about the passion. It can still seem like a very small voice or something that's inside and insistent. It doesn't have to be that something that's going to whack you over the head and say, come on, you're late, get out of bed, go, this, let's go. That's not it, because this is the kind of thing, along with one other major thing that accompanies it, and this kind of discovery or formula that I come up with now allows all of this other learning to happen for a musician. So basically two things. But I wanted to simply say, it can be that little insistent small voice. It doesn't have to be something great. And when you go with it, it doesn't mean that it has to be fireworks and everybody's giving you, attaboy, hey, great, let's go. And you have a cheering squad. No, you just realize that it's something that hasn't left you. You realize that it's something that's just with you and is a part of you. And you make a conscious decision and choose to go with it.
Amen.
And
Amen.
Of course, inspiration and
Amen.
the spirit, right?
Well, anyone that knows me and listens to some of my social media certainly knows that I always say, Francis, be still and listen.
Yes.
Be still and listen. And that still, quiet, small voice is there. And as you said, it's not fireworks. It's that over here. No, go over there. It is that small voice. And we must.
You're absolutely right.
Must listen, or we will miss it. We will, or add years to it, and where God just brings us back to it. Another question that I ask, and we might be going over a little bit in time, but not terribly. But I asked you the passion and purpose question, but the other one, and this can be our next deep dive, but is about biz ministry. Your business is your ministry. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Is right. And to me, it truly is one and the same. Seeking the kingdom of God, and all will be given to you. And if we listen and do what we are put on this planet to do, that is our ministry.
Couldn't have said it better. I realize it's the personal. When you try to write a professional mission statement, it's really personal and professional. You can't separate them.
No.
That's an important thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very, very much so.
Yes,
well, to be continued, my friend. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so.
All what you've done, what you do, and what you're continuing to do. So again, thank you. We'll see you again.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye, Megan.
Wow. Well. So I'm so pleased that Francis agreed to join us on the deep dive. His story is just full of just richness, and in areas that we might not normally speak about here on the deep dive. But as I have met this gentleman and got to know him a bit, it's very clear that God has a plan, that he is not finished. He is continuing on in his journey to bring his heart, his talent, and his ability to share with others in this. So again, thank you, Francis Leger, for joining us. I really, truly appreciate that. So folks, do know again that you can listen to this also as a podcast on Spotify. It is there, and you'll be able to listen to it on other podcasting platforms as well. But truly go to YouTube, subscribe. It helps others to find us and to listen to not only Francis's interview with me or a conversation with me, but also others that have been with me initially under the Unique Leaders banner, when I started in 20 and continued on. And then when I developed the Propel business program to start, scale, and sustain the business and life of your dreams in 21, 22, we pivoted, we evolved into the Propel Deep Dive. And so that is what it is today. And so it's been that for the last couple of years. So I encourage you to go to YouTube, but to also join us. And the trailer is on the screen to go to propel.megandimartino.com/info. And all of this is there, including my book, Hope and Possibilities. And just know that it is never too early or too late to create the life of your dreams. Again, thank you and be blessed.